Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reviews where today we have ourselves a track from an act named NinémiA titled Astrofield. And if we switch over to here, I think it's NinémiA, I'm not quite sure. The little apostrophe thing on top of the E, I think that's an A, so NinémiA. We're going to listen through this track from start till finish and we're going to hear what we think. Let's go! It's gorgeous. Is that a bass solo? It could be a guitar, but that could also be a bass guitar with that upper melody. Some gorgeous natural harmonics there.
Search beyond belief, I seek new ways to cultivate my sorrow. Tomorrow is another day. Live on an endless dream. I'm making smiths returning things I borrow. My body's by the vessel to me.
I mean, they're wonderful vocals. I really like the range that he's in, the ease of the performance itself, sinking into the guitar, bass, and synthy kind of parts we've got.
Don't take it away now, don't take away my right.
I know those are lead guitars, never mind.
I live for the mileage, don't take away my ride.
Have we got some throat singing going on? There's like this Mongolian throat singing thing where they go, oh, they go down to that lower range there. And especially with the power coming in the second time of those drums with the slap of the kicks and everything like that. It's just a really fascinating kind of ethereal aesthetic to it. and it just comes down. love the vocal fry. Sensational singer. It sits so well on top of everything else. I'm trying to sort of figure out the story and what the track's about. I find myself being carried away by that, and amongst all the other incredibly interesting stuff going on with the guitar parts there, the various harmonies and rhythm bits with the sort of more power chordal basses there, with the bass and drums and everything. There's a lot to appreciate, but woodwinds? Phenomenal dynamic range as well with the pan flutes here. I'm well impressed. I think I know what this track is about vaguely. I'm going to take a moment to sort of collect my thoughts on this, and we're going to discuss that more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named NinémiA titled Astrofield. This song, it blew me away, if I'm honest. I'm going to try and keep this conclusion short because I have a habit of kind of going on tangents and rambling on, especially with songs where there's a lot to appreciate. So I'm going to go through it in the usual order I do, the first being, what do I think this track is about? I think after listening to the song on a first listen basis, my understanding of it is that I heard lines about like touching the stars and getting blistered hands and everything like that. And earlier there was someone taking away their right or their ability to get up to the sky. And then later on, things about talking about like trying to find their own way, etc. So I'm wondering if this song is about someone who's already found their own sort of like magic place, their Astrofield, their adventure, maybe it's their imagination or something else, but like figurative. But either way, they've found their place of happiness and wonderment, and they know that it could potentially be dangerous. But regardless, they want the ability to be able to explore it anyways, and they don't want to. That would be worse feeling constrained, I suppose, or restrained, than it would be to have the opportunity to take that risk. That's my interpretation of what I think this track is about. I know there's more nuance to it. The singing was utterly fantastic. I loved the range that we had there with the clean parts, the vocal fry, the tenderness to the full-on visceral kind of like roar of it, the power. It's so effortless for this performer. Like we really felt what we were speaking about. We emoted, I think, appropriately to the words that were coming out of our mouth there. Probably one of the best vocal performances I've actually reviewed as a music reviewer in quite a while, if I'm completely honest. Like, I don't feel the need to say that. It's just, I don't really know what you could have done differently. Like, if I was going to give it a score out of like 10, I'd give it like a 9 or a 9.5. I think that there were lots of interesting vocal runs. If we had runs on most of the situations that we had, most of the lines, I think it would have been too much. But I think that it's okay to explore our flexibility with our tails of our melodies and stuff like that, especially if we're making an effort to harmonize with the other elements of the arrangement like we were. I think that was extraordinary. Like, often when I hear musicians, vocalists go off on these journeys with these notes, like, whoa, these kind of legato sections where they kind of pipe off. It's often either at the expense of the other bits of the mix which are supporting it. It's just too much, regardless of whether it is or not. But I think that we managed to find a nice midpoint here between showing our ability as a singer and telling the story in a way that was interesting for the listener and also beneficial for the track. So we had great technique on the mic, and I can understand, I think, the passion and intensity there, how it fluctuated through the track. I understood how it related to the backing arrangement of the guitar, bass, drums, etc. But I also appreciate how it worked with the lyrics to it. I need to hear the lyrics again to kind of double check, but I got parts of it together. Some parts where you seemed a bit more kind of like we're asking permission to kind of like allow ourselves to kind of ride. Other times we were like screaming out that we needed to do it regardless, that people need to take their own path. So that's the vocals, I think, in the story. The track itself, is almost 6 minutes. It's a piece where you have a softer intro with like a bass guitar solo or something. It could be a guitar solo, I could be wrong, but either way, some kind of string solo, and amongst some like kind of lower range parts there. I could swear there were synth pads or something along those lines there as well in the background, kind of very kind of eerie and magical sounding with a harmony that was almost kind of playful and innocent. It wasn't too energetic, but it was very peaceful and soothing, and you can kind of relate it, I think, to like the colors that you have inside of the album artwork there, because if I remove myself, this, I could see like lots of red and blues. So you could kind of imagine listening to it whilst you were going through space. What I was not expecting were for like the song to then kind of transition into a really powerful verse section there, where even early on you understood what was going to come from the singer and the storyteller there. The guitarist backing it up in really kind of eloquent, wonderful ways. The bass eventually coming in with the drums going. I'm not sure if we had a traditional verse-chorus structure to this. I don't think it was necessarily through composed. It was just such a big song that I hesitated to say that it had like a traditional kind of A-B kind of structure to it. There weren't even necessarily instrumental breaks. It's just that the parts with the guitars, the bass, the drums, etc. were so instrumentally complex that there was enough variety and diversity within that without needing to have a massive kind of amount of kind of breadth between it. Like, we had this gradual kind of build throughout the track that followed the intensity of the vocals, but also there was like extra layers of guitars, like some sort of like more kind of grittier, distorted bits there. The drums didn't come in straight away. They were introduced about a minute or two in as well for an extra bit of oomph on the low end. But it was very much situated on the focal point of the vocals. But then there are also lots of breaks to be able to appreciate the guitar, bass, and drum work in between. So I think that's part of what made the track so interesting throughout, was that we didn't soak it up too much. We didn't sort of overwhelm the listener with too many different leads, because I think the focus was on helping them to understand the main lead, and I kind of appreciate that. There's quite a bit going on there. We had like a bell curve where at the start it was a bit softer with, again, like the lead solo there, and then the guitar, bass and some pads. Then we had the coming in with the strings, like several different lead layers and stuff like that. Multiple harmonized guitars kind of splitting intermittently with the vocals or like kind of surrounding it. Going up into the bass and drums and going full bore with a full power force there. With less low end than I was expecting, but in a way that's very positive, like we were soaring. And at the end we came down and there was this kind of lovely kind of pan flute-ish kind of moment there, where we had just a lovely alternate lead at the end to kind of sign us out there and show that things are about to change there. Phenomenal dynamic range throughout the track. Things are not the same loudness all the time, which again made it more interesting structurally as well as like performatively. But if I talk about some of the instruments I really appreciated, I think the guitar work was sensational. We didn't have like a quote-unquote lead guitar solo, but we had different lead motifs there, following loyally to the various scales and modes that were presented within the harmonies and progressions. We had motifs that we instantiated earlier on that we built on throughout. We were very kind of like faithful to some of the earlier sort of chordal ideas there and helped to kind of develop them. Whilst it was more in like the number of guitar layers and like the one guitar doing a lot of different things. And I kind of appreciate that, because it allows that's the beauty of modern studio production, is that you can just kind of go this guitar does this at this point, like 75 and 50, etc. So I like how we layered things and structured things there in different parts of the frequency spectrum with the guitar there. We had really efficient playing there with some broken chords and arpeggios on the light sort of like rhythm parts with the steel strings there. And like we had kind of soaked parts there with a bit of reverb on some really kind of spacey, sort of airy, but also kind of epic sounding lead parts as well. They're very minimalist. We weren't trying to take too much focus away from the singer, but it was enough to kind of add a bit of fancy in that upper range there to contrast some of the lower mids of the guitar parts. And that isn't even talking about the bass. We had an unconventional bass line there. I don't think we was completely situated within one key the entire time. We had some parallel majors or minors in there. But what I enjoy about the bass guitar is that we not only knew to kind of go down a bit and kind of follow the chords of the guitars and kind of be loyal with or be sort of supportive with the root notes and maybe some fifths and stuff working within the triads. But we also, again, I'm pretty sure there was a bass solo at the start. And we were nice and melodic with it and explored the upper end of the fretboard as well in a way that was charming and made sense with the other components. Well, I think we also had a bass layer underneath that in that intro part as well. But just knowing how to stack bass guitars is like next level stuff, and I enjoy that. I think that we also had some interesting effects both on the bass and the guitars, like use of chorus alongside the reverbs and such like that gave it a nostalgic feel, like a kind of spacey feel there. Interesting use of that kind of 80s tonality to it. There was a bit of filtering as well. A lot of the power of this track was the tones that were involved and making use of the possibilities when they're manipulating waveforms. But the bass guitar in its solo section was wonderfully efficient with the note choices there. It was very soulful and it had a great voice to it. And I think that it suited the mood of a lot of the other parts of the jump, but there were no sharp edges to it or anything like that. It was almost very soothing. The only part that really got kind of very vicious with this track was the grit on the vocals when I started to cry out for stuff and that up a bit. And I think that was completely well deserved. But the bass was tremendous. I think the playing was very adept and it suited the guitar parts extremely well. The drums, I think the drums were incredibly supportive of the rest of the mix. We clearly had a proficiency on it. We knew, I think, with the kit that less is more. We were tight with our grooves there. We had some interesting sort of like eighth note parts. I think there might have been also been some 16ths in there. But like I think we were trying to follow the accents that the vocals left within the mix, whilst also following along to the pathways and the different sequences of the different bass and guitar parts. We were trying to sort of keep a fundamental sense of groove to it without overstepping or overplaying. But by doing that, we showed our finesse on the kit and our competency in that regard. And I think you could have had like really crazy, stupid, like ridiculous drum fills in this track and stuff like that. But I think the risk with the lack of other leads is that it would have overwhelmed or overcomplicated it. So I'm thankful for the drummer for simply knowing when to pocket, when to maybe like do some occasional sort of, like fill transitions and stuff like that. And like the dynamic range on the kit was phenomenal as well. But it was very kind of reserved, and I have to admire that. I think it was just, if there weren't like little bits of synth and noisy parts there, like just to kind of add a bit of space in the mid-range and the stereo field and stuff like that, a bit of color there, some wonderful triad choices there, without a lack of extensions there. I think it was simply just, again, the harmonized guitar layers, I think I mentioned that in the guitar section, but it's also the pan flute that we had near the end. That was one of my other favorite instruments. The fluidity of that, the smoothness of that within a mix where a lot of other stuff was as well, but it had a different texture and tone to it that wasn't present before. It gave us a sense of movement and that change was going to occur. It was almost like it was flitting and flying through the air and amongst everything else that we created within the environment of the ether of the track. And I mean, if I'm honest, it was just beautiful sounding. There were a lot of beautiful textures within this track. There were, again, apart from the vocal grit, there were no hard edges there. But it was just nice to have an alternate lead voicing at the end to signal things were ending and would sort of told us truth. And maybe the person telling the story had gotten to reach the stars again. But the theme outside of it, the main part, I can hear the melody, da 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 da. Like I can hear that now. It's wonderful that it is so upbeat and positive, despite the fact I get the impression we've been struggling for the fact that we might not have been able to get access to that. It's almost like we had a hope and optimism that we'd be able to reach that Astrofield again. And I like the fact that despite the heaviness of a lot of the components within this, and that maybe the propensity to potentially be a little bit less kind of like happy and like peaceful about it, we knew to keep the actual performance of the individual instruments kind of like nice and kind of not fluffy, but like we knew to have dynamic range so things went hardcore all the time. We knew when things were a little bit louder to balance things out with a lack of kind of accidentals and chromatics and stuff like that. We kept things relatively majorist, I suppose, and a part of the wonderment of it came from those major leanings. I think like if you take the chord progression by itself and completely remove the technicality and the mass layerings of the different sort of instrumental component parts in the mix, you have a fairly easy to sort of like digest and understand chord progression and theme there that is elevated by the manipulation of the various riffs and stuff throughout to adjust things to keep it entertaining, creating a track where I think it's just pleasant to listen through the whole way and you want to hear what happens next. So I think that in that regard, the track is a success and I don't think there's a note out of place. But the studio recording, mixing and mastering was really well done. I mean, the vocals were nice and clear in the mix. The bass guitar and drums were fantastically sort of niched as well. And the frequency spectrum and the stereo field, there were no red resonant frequencies either. The any sort of like when we went down the dynamic curve there, things were in the same levels. Things were glued. but like there was dynamic range. You know, they didn't over compress things. The vocals sounded nice and raw. They had a bit of polish. Not that they needed to fix them because the guy could sing, but it's more like that they EQ'd it and made it sort of like sit with everything else, regardless of how loud or quiet it was. And you know, it was nice and loud without pump because the bus compression limiting was handled. There was lots of post effects as well there, and a deliberate determination of like trying to make it more of a sort of like ethereal, kind of out of this world experience. I think they did incredibly well doing this track. I'm really happy with it. They should be proud of themselves. But this is my review of NinémiA's track Astrofield, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go show us some love via their various social medias and Spotify page, and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as either hell more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world, and I'll catch you in the next review. Spiderhands out.